Hello everyone, and welcome to SUNUP. I'm Lyndall Stout. When cattle change feed, it can sometimes cause issues with the rumen. Today, OSU beef cattle specialist Dr. Paul Beck tells us when producers should start watching for bloat in their livestock.
Wheat pasture is an outstanding resource in Oklahoma. It gives our producers a competitive advantage economically when they take advantage of it. It's high in protein, it's highly digestible, and it can promote very high gains of growing cattle or keep body condition on cows. But the things that make it high quality and promote these high growth of the calves can lead to other issues. And one of those issues is bloat, which is simply a buildup of gas in the rumen. And it's associated with a formation of a stable foam on the top of the rumen mat. And the gases, fermentation gases in the rumen, bubble up through that and cause this foam buildup. This buildup of gas can lead to suffocation of the animal and ultimately death. Most often very often when we see bloat, it occurs after a period of warm weather when we have wheat pasture growing rapidly and it's very high in soluble proteins and carbohydrates, followed by a very cold night where we have a frost. And what that does is it disrupts the cells in the wheat plant and makes those soluble carbohydrates and proteins more available in the rumen, leading to bloat on these cattle. Other things in that wheat plant that make cattle more susceptible to bloat, along with the protein and the sugars or carbohydrates, is it's low in calcium and also low in fiber. The calcium is associated with muscle contraction in the animal, and that could lead to weaker muscle contractions of the rumen. When we have ruminal contractions, that would help expel the gas from the rumen. The low fiber nature of the forage leads to less rumen contractions because fiber is associated with scratch factor on the rumen and motility of the rumen, so the lack of fiber can lead to issues as well. So there are multiple things that come together in that wheat plant that leads it to be bloat provocative or increases the bloat nature. There are grazing management opportunities for wheat pasture that could decrease the problem with bloat. One of those would be to stock the cattle extremely heavily so that they are not able to consume as much wheat as they would normally want to, slow down the intake rate of that wheat pasture. Also, we've seen just the opposite. If we are rotationally grazing wheat pasture, we can let it get more mature and build up the fiber in that wheat so that it does not have those conditions that lead it to be causing bloat. The best case is to try to catch it early, and it can occur very rapidly whenever it starts.
We're here now with Ryan Reuter, beef cattle nutritionist. And Ryan, you and the team have developed a new app that looks into bloat. Kind of tell us what that's all about.
You bet, Lyndall. The OSU App Center developed an app for us called Bloat Tracker, and it's really a citizen science project where ranchers can submit data about the bloat that they observe on their farms, and they send that data in through the app, and that lets OSU researchers capture the data about when bloat's occurring. We can match that up with some data from the Mesonet or from weather stations about the environment, and we can learn a lot more about what environmental conditions are most prevalent at causing bloat.
So this app, first and foremost, again, what's it called and where can I find it?
Okay, the app is called Bloat Tracker, and it's available on the Apple App Store right now. We don't have an Android version yet, but we may be working on that in the future. But Bloat Tracker, if you search for Bloat Tracker on the Apple App Store, you can find it.
There are lots of ways to do research. Why the app approach?
Yeah, so we decided to take the app approach and the citizen science approach with this question of bloat specifically because bloat is really a hard subject to do research on because it happens so sporadically and we can't really experimentally reproduce bloat in cattle. And so it really fits in this approach of, rather than trying to conduct a controlled trial about bloat, to just go out into the real world and collect a lot of data from ranchers, from the real world, and just kind of do a data mining approach with big data.
And we know folks watching may be engaged in other things as well, through weather or insect migration. This is not new. You're just applying it to this topic.
Absolutely. The citizen science approach has been used and really has some nice success stories in lots of areas of science. And it's cool, I think, and fun to be able to apply this to production agriculture. And take a little different approach on doing some beef cattle nutrition research. And
then hopefully have some recommendations and better solutions in the future, ultimately.
Absolutely. The long-term goal would be to get enough data from producers that we can feel like we can do a pretty good job predicting when bloat would occur based on the weather or other environmental patterns. Predict when bloat might occur in specific areas of the state, and then be able to send out almost a bloat warning to producers in that area.
So Bloat Tracker on the App Store.
Bloat Tracker on the App Store.
Okay, well, keep us posted. We'll be waiting to hear how it all works out.
That's great.
Thanks a lot, Ryan.
Well, this morning I want to talk to you a little bit about bloat. Bloat is nothing more than just excessive accumulation of gas in the rumen. We have two forms of bloat. We have what we refer to as a gas bloat, which is usually associated with some type of obstruction, which does not allow for the animal to take the gas off, or we also have it associated with grain overload, and you get this fermentation of that grain and you get this excessive accumulation of gas. The other form is what we call as frothy bloat, and that's just where all the materials are mixed inside that rumen. Typically, the clinical signs that you're going to see with bloat is you're just going to see this excessive tight skin on the left side of the animal. These animals may be in pain. You may see the animal kick at its abdomen or walk around a lot. Now, as far as treatment is concerned, the most important thing is to try to get that gas off of that rumen. So a lot of times we're going to use some type of nasal gastric tube, which we can put that down, large bore tube that will let that gas come off. In extremely dangerous situation, we actually have to do surgery, a rumenotomy, open up the rumen and let that gas out, or use a trocar to puncture into the rumen to let that gas off. Other treatments we'll do is we'll administer antacids when we have a gas bloat, and we'll use some type of anti-foaming agent when we have a frothy bloat. The way to prevent this is we never want to turn hungry animals out onto lush green pastures such as cereal grains or pastures that have a lot of lagoons in them. You want to gradually adapt these animals to new pastures, or when you're changing feeds, you want to gradually adapt, make that gradual change over several days to that new feed. Rotating pastures or grazing mature pastures will reduce the incidence of bloat. If you'd like some more information about bloat, go to sunup.okstate.edu.
As we get even closer to the spring calving season, and in some cases it's already started for Oklahoma producers that breed their heifers to be calving just a little bit ahead of the mature cows, so some of those are already at the point where they're about to deliver calves. One of the things that people ask me about are what are the signs that they should look for as they're observing these cows or heifers as to which ones are going to be the ones to calve next, and they need to get them up next to the headquarters area, up next to the calving shed, where they can observe them closely to see if they need assistance during the calving process. Well, let's start with the fact that even a couple of weeks ahead of calving, we may see the filling of the udder. And this is especially true in older cows, cows that give a lot of milk. In some cases with that 2-year-old, especially if she doesn't have the genetic capability to produce a lot of milk, we may not see much filling of the udder until just right before calving. So that's one clue, but it's not going to be really reliable. Another thing that we might watch is a little bit of swelling around the vulva, and this will be different in different breeds of cattle. Those that have those with Brahman influence may notice that this is more noticeable in their cattle than what we might see in British breeds such as Angus Herefords. As we get a little closer to calving time, then I think there's some keys that we can really hone in on. You remember in the past we've talked about the 3 stages of parturition. Well, stage 1 generally takes place in the neighborhood of 4 to 24 hours right before the delivery process begins. And very little can we see of what's happening in stage 1 unless we're really observant, because what's happening is the hormonal changes that's taking place that allow the relaxation of the ligaments around the pelvic area and the softening of the collagen in the cervix. And this is due to release of a hormone called relaxin that will take place generally in the last day right before calving. Now, this is where, if you're really watching these cattle closely on an everyday basis, you might pick up on that particular sign. Watch for the sinking, the relaxation of the ligaments right around the tailhead, right in front of the pin bones, and you'll see just a real slight, subtle sinking of that area. If you'll watch these cattle closely, I think you'll pick up on that one. That one tells me then that we're probably within 24 hours of when this heifer is going to go into stage 2 of the delivery process, where she's eventually going to deliver that calf either without assistance or with your help in 1 to 2 hours. So watch that particular one very closely. I think it can be a real key in terms of making sure that you get the right heifer up next to the facility where you can provide assistance to her in a very timely manner. Hey, we look forward to visiting with you again next week on SUNUP's Cow-Calf Corner.
Well, phase 1 of the China trade deal has been agreed upon. So, Derrell, do you see any opportunities for beef in that trade deal?
Well, I do think this opens up new possibilities for the U.S. It's the first step, probably of several steps. You know, if the situation in China is such that China has been the fastest growing beef market, they are the biggest beef importing country in the world now, and then when you add on the additional protein demand in China as a result of African swine fever, you know, there's a lot of opportunity for U.S. beef. And so this phase 1 deal gives us better access in terms of the kinds of products that we can export there. So, you know, we're moving down that road. We still have to work on some tariff issues and other things.
Moving to a different part of the world, Australia is having those devastating brush fires, but has that impacted beef markets at all?
Well, it will have some impact. Really, the brush fires are more a symptom of the broader drought issues in Australia. Now, the fires themselves, I've seen reports out of Australia that would suggest about 9% of the Australian cattle herd is in areas severely impacted by the fires. Another 11% or so in areas somewhat impacted by the fires. But as a result of the drought that got to the point where we're having the fires, Australia's cattle herd is severely drawn down. Their ability to produce and export is going to be severely limited for the next few years. So that will impact global beef markets.
Well, that you know, it's going to impact global beef markets, but will that ripple effect, you know, move to the U.S.?
Well, it probably will. The U.S. imports a lot of beef from Australia, typically processing beef for our ground beef market. You know, when you combine the restricted production of beef in Australia with the fact that they're also shipping a lot more beef to China right now to meet that growing demand in China, it may have some changes or some implications for at least the sources and the flows of beef products that we would use in the U.S.
So the USDA released a crop outlook recently. What do you expect for hay production in 2020?
Well, you know, going into 2020, we have hay stocks nationwide that are a little bit bigger. USDA released numbers on 2019 production. It was up nationwide. It was up in Oklahoma, although Oklahoma's December 1 hay stocks were actually down year over year. However, the region around us, Missouri, Kansas, Arkansas, Texas, all have larger hay stocks. So nationwide, generally, and certainly in this region, I think hay supplies are adequate. We've had some questions about quality, and that may be an issue that producers are dealing with. We had a lot of wet weather last year that made it difficult to put up higher quality hay, but it looks like overall supplies are pretty good as we go into 2020. Regionally, hay stocks appear to be pretty adequate.
All right, thanks, Derrell. Dr. Derrell Peel, Livestock Marketing Specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
Welcome to the Mesonet Weather Report. I'm Wes Lee. One of the most popular agricultural tools on our Mesonet website is the Cattle Comfort Advisor. This tool is similar to Wind Chill for humans, however, it utilizes more weather variables. The Cattle Comfort Index map for Wednesday afternoon shows most of the numbers were in or close to the gray comfortable range. However, the blue range was starting to indicate a cold caution category. Air temperatures near the same time were much higher as seen here. So why were the Cattle Comfort Index numbers lower? On Wednesday afternoon, it was humid, skies were cloudy, and the wind was blowing 10 to 15 miles per hour. This table shows the correction factor that we get in the wintertime from including these weather variables. In Seminole, the air temperature was reduced by 2.9 degrees for humidity, 9.5 degrees for wind, and 2.6 degrees for sunlight. The comfort index gives us an idea of how much to increase cattle feed to meet the energy requirements for colder weather. A rule of thumb is to feed 10% more feed for every 10 degrees the index is below freezing. However, large, rapid changes in diet could cause digestive issues. Therefore, for very cold events, you may have to gradually increase feed several days in advance for the storm. Gary is up next with some long-range forecast information.
Thanks, Wes, and good morning, everyone. Well, with the last couple of weeks of good rains, we finally have some big movement on the U.S. Drought Monitor map. Let's get right to that new map. As you can see, we now have just a little bit of moderate drought confined down into far southwestern Oklahoma and a little bit of abnormally dry conditions surrounding that area. So that's been a region of the state that's seen drought from moderate to severe to extreme through the last 6 to 9 months. So it's great to see we're finally starting to make a dent in the drought down in that part of the state. And we still have moderate to severe drought up in the far western panhandle. So that's another area where we're going to need to get some good precipitation to start to whittle that area down. The rest of the state's in pretty good shape. Now we're going to take a look into the next month and then the next 3 months with the Climate Prediction Center's outlook maps. First, for February, we see increased odds of below normal temperatures across basically the northern half of the state. For precipitation, there's really no good signal except for a little bit of increased odds of below normal precipitation up in the far northeast. I don't really think the far northeastern part of the state's going to complain about that if it comes true. Now we're going to look at February through April, and again we see increased odds of above normal temperatures down in the far southern Oklahoma and the far western panhandle. The rest of the state, really no good signal again. When we look at precipitation, for the entire state, it's equal chances of above, below, or near normal precipitation chances. So it's the day-to-day weather conditions that can really impact what's going on in your part of the state. That's it for this time. We'll see you next time on the Mesonet Weather Report.
We're joined now by Amy Hagerman, our Extension Ag Policy Specialist. And Amy, the new year, people are getting organized, some important dates to remember and mark the calendar. Absolutely. This is a great time of year to think about your records, what you need to have in place, the kinds of reports that you need to file, and to think about those important deadlines. The first one is the ARC and PLC election and enrollment. And I know we've talked about this several times on the show and around the state, but it's so important to realize that that March 15th deadline for election for 19 and 20 and for enrollment for 19 is a really hard deadline for USDA. Even March 16th is too late, and you're giving up your 2019 potential payments if you miss it. So make that appointment with FSA right away. Another thing that people may have received information on is they may have already received a letter if they have an expiring contract for the Conservation Reserve Program. So sometime this year, we've got a lot of folks in Oklahoma that will be making some decisions around their CRP land. Are they going to keep it in CRP, and we had some changes in this farm bill, or are they going to actually convert it out and put it in another use? So you and your colleagues are putting together some programming regarding decisions with CRP, right? Yeah, there's the changes in CRP, the potential rental rates, what to do with that land, and also the tax implications. If there's land that's been in CRP for several years, there are some tax implications of actually moving that land out of CRP. So we're putting together some programming for extension that's going to start at the end of February for those who are faced with those decisions in the coming year for land that may have been in that program for quite a long time. Let's talk about trade now. There's been some progress in the last couple of weeks, lots of news and lots of people talking about it. What does this kind of mean for producers and agriculture in general? Yeah, I think these are some really positive moves forward in terms of the kinds of certainty in what will happen in our markets in the next year, as much as we can have certainty, of course, in what's happening in markets. But the China Phase 1 deal that was signed recently, that's going to be some purchase of agricultural goods, and that has the potential to boost prices for our producers here in the U.S. And then also the USMCA agreement, which was recently passed by our legislature here in the U.S. Next week, it's going up in front of the Canadian legislature to be ratified there. And that's the next big hurdle. We can't implement it until all three countries that are participating have ratified it. And that's, again, just some good news, some certainty going into this year when we've had some lower market price expectations from 19 and going into 20. So for producers who are making that ARC and PLC decision, or they're making decisions on what to plant in the spring, crop insurance to buy, those market price expectations are really important. Okay. Keep us posted. We know Dr. Sanders will as well. Absolutely. Amy, good to see you. Thanks a lot. All right. Thank you.
It's time to take a look in the crop markets. So Kim, what's going on?
Well, not much. You look at wheat this last week. We had a little rally in the middle of the week, back off of that. So just wheat and corn wallowing around mostly. Soybeans, those prices are falling off, about 25 cents. Cotton market moved 2 cents. So just not much going on in those markets.
Is there any news going on with China and soybeans?
Oh yeah, if you look at what's going on with China and soybeans, the market's waiting on those soybean purchases. What you hear the market saying is that where's China? You know, we've got phase 1 and we should have purchases and the price is going down there. But what you got to realize is that phase 1 doesn't come into effect until the 14th of February. Also, if you're China, and China knows how to market and knows how to buy commodities, if the longer they delay buying soybeans, the lower that price is going to go and the cheaper they can get the beans. That's just smart not to make an agreement, come in and buy right off the bat. So I think some people in the market are getting a little hurry, and I think they're getting antsy a little quick. But we'll know when China buys the beans when they buy the beans.
You mentioned wheat is trending upward. Is that trend going to keep going up?
Well, there's a lot going on in the wheat market. You look at Russia, it's reported that they're going to probably limit their export sales, but what the market is ignoring, I believe, is that Ukraine is more than making up for Russia's reduction in exports, at least to date. You look at France, they got the labor strike, the transportation strike. They've got good export demand. They just can't get that wheat to the market, and so I think that's supporting our prices there. You look at the spreads between soft red winter wheat and hard red winter wheat in Oklahoma. You know, that spread was up around 95 cents, premium of soft to hard. It got down to in the 70s, low 70s. It's back up to around 80 or 85 now. And so you got that spread going. So it's 50-50 at the best that we'll see higher prices. I won't be surprised, especially if France can settle that strike, that wheat prices back off a little bit.
You know, taking all that into consideration, in your opinion, what's the best time to sell?
Well, if you look over the last 10 years and average those 10-year monthly prices, the time to sell wheat is in June, July, or August. You look at those prices, if you average for that 10-year, June was $5.53, July was $5.53, and August was $5.67. Go out to October, November, it's $5.25. So obviously, just at harvest, pull the trigger. Now there's some potential for changes down the futures, but I don't believe this is going to change anytime soon.
Well, what about those producers who have on-farm storage?
If you have on-farm storage, it doesn't, you got to make up 25 cents from June, July, and August to sell out, and unless you can merchandise that product and get a protein premium, then it's not going to pay. However, what you got to look at on that protein premium, often it's that premium's in at harvest and it goes away as you get out into the fall. So on-farm storage may not help that much unless you can merchandise that product.
All right, thanks, Kim. Kim Anderson, Grain Marketing Specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
That'll do it for us this week. Remember, you can find us anytime at sunup.okstate.edu and also follow us on YouTube and social media. I'm Lyndall Stout. Have a great week, everyone, and remember, Oklahoma agriculture starts at sunup.